We're taking you live now to Perth, where Shadow Minister for Defence Andrew Hastie is speaking.
Even as the EU is standing up its own task force. Under this plan, we'll see HMAS Anzac permanently retired from the water with no replacement until the end of the decade. The tender for the general purpose frigate won't be complete until 2026, and cutting of steel at Henderson won't be confirmed for some time. Labor also has a major recruitment and a retention crisis on its hands. Morale is at an all-time low. They've committed to nuclear submarines and now the surface fleet. What is their strategy to find and hold talented young Australians to crew both our future submarines and our future surface fleet? Labor are reaping the whirlwind of their failures during their 6 years under the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd governments, where they failed to commission a single ship. The truth is that Richard Marles went to Cabinet and lost to Jim Chalmers, Penny Wong and Katie Gallagher. He couldn't secure any more money for this over the forward estimates, which is why all the money is over the next decade. The money proves that. $1.7 billion over the forward estimates, $11.1 billion over the next decade. Richard Marles loves talking about the former coalition government, and he loves talking about the next decade, comparing projected defence spends in the 2030s, anything but the present, and the present is where the challenges are, the most pressing strategic challenges since the end of the Second World War. Defence is the big league, and so failures have consequences. Failures have consequences for our soldiers, sailors and airmen. It has failures for our country. That's why we've got to get it right. And so Richard Marles today should be asking himself, what can I fix by 2026? What can I fix by 2026? Maybe the Prime Minister should scribble that on his arm too, along with his GST pledge. So, in closing, the opposition is ambitious for Australia, for our fighting men and women, and we welcome the ambition of this plan. We want to see our surface fleet grow, make no mistake. But this is a weak government. They are weak on defence. And this last year has shown that the Albanese government pays lip service to defence but delivers very little. Since the Defence Strategic Review, we've seen no new money. We've seen deferral of tough decisions. It took 300 days for this government to respond to the Surface Fleet Review. And we've seen cuts to capability. We've seen that in the Army. And there's a reason why our Anzac-class frigates can't deploy to the Red Sea, and I'm sure it's not just political will, despite the Chief of Navy going into bat for his sailors. I think there's more to it than that, and that's why we need investment now, immediate investment in the near future. And Richard Marles got rolled at Cabinet. He couldn't secure any more than $1.7 billion investment for the Surface Fleet Review. I'll now take some questions.
All these things are being heralded as new. To your knowledge, are any of them just being re-announced or not actually that new, as we've been told?
Well, this is a new plan, and I asked the Minister for a briefing, and his staff declined to give one to me until tomorrow. So as for the detail, I'm none the wiser than the press gallery, who enjoyed the benefit of a lock-up this morning prior to the press release.
Do you think this will encourage more people to enlist in the Navy, as Richard Marles had mentioned?
Well, I hope so. I thought the Chief of Navy did a great job pitching service in the Royal Australian Navy this morning. It's a great opportunity to serve your country, to see the world, for young Australians who are aspirational, who are struggling with the cost of living, who want a better future. The Navy is a great way to do all those things. So it still remains a big challenge, though, recruiting people and then retaining people. 8.1% retention, or a separation rate of 8.1%, is still too high. It needs to be lower if we're going to be able to crew our future submarines, our future frigates, our air warfare destroyers, and whatever capabilities that we need.
The top of the handout to journos says enhanced lethality. What does that mean?
Well, I hope we can reach out and touch our enemies. And so I hope that means more missiles on these future frigates. That's been one of the challenges, not having enough firepower. So we want to see that. Today, again, it was very conceptual from the government. There wasn't a lot of money. There's a lot of talking about the future. As I said, Richard Marles loves reaching out to the 2030s and talking from his crystal ball. But we want to see how this is going to play out. It doesn't go to tender until 2026. We won't see the first frigate until 2031, even as we're retiring HMAS Anzac. and we need more detail on what these frigates will be like. And I suppose that'll come out. There's 4 shipbuilding companies that will go to tender. Let's see what happens.
Do you think the first 3 ships should be built in Australia?
That's a decision for government. My view is that speed is of the essence. The government can't keep getting up and saying Australia is facing the most dangerous strategic circumstances since the end of the Second World War and do nothing about it. In fact, wait until 2031 to get the next frigate. The minister should be working out what he can fix by 2026. That's the challenge.
What else is needed?
Well, I think firepower is something that we need. We need to be able to deter and hold at risk a strategic adversary. And I think if you look at what's happening in Ukraine and elsewhere around the world, what's happening in the Red Sea, I think there's plenty of lessons for us to learn. And I think low-cost munitions, such as we're seeing in the Red Sea, where shipping lanes are being disrupted by loitering munitions, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles. It's somewhat ironic, I think, that the Iranian-backed Houthis probably have a better strike capability than the Australian Defence Force.
That was the Shadow Defence Minister Andrew Hastings.